everybody. I'm sure that we are going to have a very interesting discussion. So this is the time you to ask anything.
What did you study in school?
Good question. Yes. ABC.
That's good.
Sri Lankan education system is free from Montessori up to the university. Sri Lanka has close upon 198 different types of degrees which have been offered, including medical, architecture, engineering, law, obviously all the humanities, the languages, interior decorating, architecture, or the whole lot is there. There's a lot of pressure to get into the government universities. Out of the 250,000 which sit for the university entrance examinations, only 25,000 get a chance of getting into the universities, and of which only 300 get to medical college. So it's a very competitive field where the universities are concerned, entrances. The government has been looking at private universities in a strong manner, and they've gone ahead with a few private universities. Those universities are generally affiliated with either Australian, Indian, or with British universities, and they give a degree which is in accordance to their standards and specifications, which will be quite good. But of course they're expensive, those degrees are. But comparatively, a student going abroad to England or to Australia and living there and studying, obviously it's much cheaper than that, but much more expensive than the free education degree which will be at in Sri Lanka. The government is having a medical college for which they've come into a lot of opposition from the student unions. The student unions are opposing the medical college, the private medical college, on the grounds that that the students who are passing out from that medical college will have unfair advantage in positions in the government once they pass out. That the government medical college students will not have an opportunity that the private medical college students would, and they are opposing it. Which there's no justification for a thing like that, because there's a common examination which they would sit for. But the argument being that they are richer and more influential, and they'll be able to get to the more fashionable locations for job opportunities. Yeah, and they've been quite violent. Some of the demonstrations, they had to be water cannons were used and tear gas was used, and it was not very pleasant. Yeah.
When was that?
2 weeks ago.
Very recent.
Yeah, yeah. And there's quite a lot of students have been abroad for their education as well, but the government hopes to control that tide when and if possible. So that's about 150 doctors have gone off. The time they leave, the government says you need to sign a bond where you need to be paying the Sri Lankan government 10 million Sri Lankan rupees, which is about $100,000 if they are leaving. The time they leave is they go for their post-graduation examination, like to England, and that's where they get picked up and they move on. Yeah. But I really don't sometimes understand why the doctors leave. For the simple reason, the doctors, I personally think they have a good time here. And one of my friends who is a doctor who went to England, now has gone to America, and he's in Alaska. And he has not said it, but the temperatures, the living conditions couldn't be that great, having got used to 30 centigrade heat here. He had not complained, he had never said anything bad, but I have my reservations about his life there. Yes, I think he's economically very well off, but I have my concerns.
Money can't buy that.
But the education is cost free.
Yeah.
So that some places that offer that require students to sign a document saying that when you finish, you have to give like 4 or 5 years service to the country?
No, it's at the time that you are sent for your post-graduation examinations to England or some of those countries for your FRCS where a doctor is concerned. That is the stage that you will be asked to sign in. But until that time, no, there is no, the government doesn't enforce that kind of thing because it finds it extremely difficult enforcing the law. Because if a guy wants to leave, it's very difficult to control it. Yeah. Our relationship with China has been extremely good. In 1972, when the Nixon administration was playing table tennis with China, we had diplomatic relationship with them, full-fledged DPL relationship with China. We always recognize the mainland China as China and never Taiwan. And China always appreciates us for that. Sri Lanka as an island, 10,800 kilometers away is the South Pole. In between us and the South Pole, there's nothing. There's only us. And the Indian Ocean, as was foreseen with the loss of the Malaysian Airways flight, is totally empty. People really don't know anything about that ocean. Is there gold? Is there oil? Is there gas? Is there titanium? Nobody knows. And we are the most sensible location to discover the whole of Indian Ocean. Whoever is based in Sri Lanka and controls Sri Lanka controls the Indian Ocean and controls Asia. And as such, we are very strategic. I'm surprised that America has ignored us all these years. Americans had a relay station, communication place in Diogo Garcia, which is a very small corally island about 1,000 kilometers from Male. But they never have ventured out onto our areas. I think I do understand in the early 20th century that kind of thinking was justifiable, saying that that land didn't have oil, that land didn't have gold and did not come. No, but they should have seen the strategic importance of Sri Lanka, our positioning. And that should have triggered many an alarm bell in Washington. But for some reason it hasn't. Maybe in due respect to India, because India would have protested, they did actually, a large scale presence of Americans in Sri Lanka, but it never happened. In 1986 we had 1986 we had Kitty Hawk coming with 6,000 sailors, and the Indian was very worried. Yes, what are they doing here? Yeah.
Coast Guard too? Or?
Yeah, Coast Guards are part and parcel of the Navy, but we have a close upon, at the time of the war we had about 750,000 among the three forces. It has been reduced down to 500,000 at the moment.
Is it voluntary or do people?
It's all voluntary. Yeah.
And what's the time frame for serving?
Basic soldier would be 12 years.
Oh,
Wow.
And after which, if you are going to be a non-commissioned officer or an NCO, up to 22 years. If you are an officer, you would start as a cadet, and you could climb the ladder up to a lieutenant general in a span of 25 years. Well, at a position of being a major, you can, after 12 years of service, you can retire, not retire, you can resign. You're not pensionable, but you can retire. Yes.
Many books is Who Owns the World? It's quite an interesting volume, and I've forgotten the specific figures, but U.S. corporations own the equivalent of 70% of the world, even though they can comprise a much smaller proportion. And many people view the USA as a bully country in terms of intimidating or attempting to intimidate the smaller, less developed, less economically developed countries. is the attitude of, let's say, the average educated Sri Lankan aware of the USA perspective on things, especially now, of course?
Very much, yes. The educated Sri Lankans, quite a few of them have been to the American universities and have graduated from them. We do have our Rhodes Scholars who have been to the American universities and come back. We have the American Field Service scholarships in the early 70s and 80s. There were numbers of people who went on those scholarships and came back. Sri Lanka has been quite into the education system of Americas. And but though the American graduates have come here, the American investments in Sri Lanka have been limited. We have not had the numbers of people coming and investing in Sri Lanka in those levels. So the proportions of the bullying tactic, we haven't had the privilege of being bullied yet. That hasn't occurred because of the investment opportunities. They haven't taken on those investment opportunities for various reasons. But it's a pity really that they may not have had the foresight in doing it. That would have encouraged Sri Lanka go towards China a little more than we towards America. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Of course, there were concerns. I think there was a book written recently that 10% of the world population owns 50% of the assets.
More.
Yeah, so
A lot more.
a lot more. Okay. Yes. But in Sri Lanka, the American investments are very limited, and those investments are into the garment industry mostly. We do have companies like Nike, Victoria's Secrets, Mango, Denim, Levi's. Those companies investing, but that's very small. We don't have the large scale investments here. The largest amount of foreign exchange to Sri Lanka is $8 billion US, which comes from the expatriate community in the Middle East. We have 1.5 million Sri Lankans out of the country contributing to the economy. Yeah, I totally agree, it's not good. But
is the tourist trade really good?
tourist trade contributed $3 billion US last year, with 2 million tourists coming in. But at the moment it's at the 4th position of foreign exchange earning for the country. But we hope it will climb the scales by 2020, another 3 years. First is the people. First is people who are in the Middle East. Tea is the third.
Oh, tea is third. I thought it was first. I read that not too long ago.
What is third? Oh, tea.
Oh, I thought it was first.
And what's number 2 then?
The garment industry.
The government industry. Oh, okay. Oh.
Third is rubber and tea in combination. The agriculture sector would be the third.
Oh, okay.
And fourth is tourism. Yeah. No, we don't do the yarn. We import the yarn, cut the yarn, stitch the yarn, button it up, zip it up, and send them out. Yeah.
So you do the designs and put it all together.
Correct.
I got it. Okay.
Yes, as I said earlier, we do some of the more fashionable industries. The Mango and Levi's and Victoria's Secrets and those, yeah. Those ones are all done here in Sri Lanka. Actually, Sri Lanka was very worried about the garment industry at one stage, thinking that we might be outdone by Vietnam and Bangladesh. And we opted to go 2 notches higher, where we will do the, not the sweatshop, we will do the ethical garment. And actually, the labels which come from Sri Lanka says ethical garments. We use the word ethical on it. And that has given us a edge over the other garments. Yes. Oh yes, of course we do have the Speedo. Yes, we do some of the finest bathing costumes. Yeah, it's so skin tight that you swim like the sharks. Yes, it's a very fine fabric which is done, and You can get it to your skin color now. The garment industry is 80% of women who are in the garment industry, and the rights of women have been something very important which people have been fighting for, especially on their maternity leave and making sure that they have time off to see their children, and that most of these factories have been allowing the women to do. The 9 hours is a working day. They need to be given an hour's break for meals. They have to be given after working for 45 hours, they need to be given a break. Anybody above the age of 18 needs to be employed. You can take in a person at the age of 17 provided that he's given an official training for 1 year. You can take him as a training, but the training needs to be specified. It needs to be supervised, it needs to be specified, and it needs to have a syllabus on which he will go through. Yeah. And then the government has stipulated numbers of toilet for that number of workers. It's quite clear. Yeah. And also the larger garment factories do send their own people to check if the factories are adhering to the regulations stipulated, yes. Because they find sometimes if they don't, the backlash is far worse. Yes. We do respect the rights of women quite a lot, and it has not, because I think this rape thing in India comes with, I will teach you a lesson. You should behave yourself because you belong to a different community or a caste, whereas Sri Lanka we don't have that. We are quite liberal in our thinking, and women are at an equal footing. I think the Buddhism has had a very strong influence in that, where a woman is not considered to be inferior but your partner in life. That kind of thinking has had a strong. Of course, we do have rape and sexual abuse happening. It's not something isolated, but it's not widespread. Yeah.
Is there an investigative journalism type of press, or is it mainly social media that's replacing newspapers?
No, we have investigative journalism. In fact, one of the reasons why the last government fell was because of the investigative journalism which was there, which they exposed some of the monies which has been taken by the previous governments, some of the contracts that they have undertaken, some of the positioning of their relatives in positions of power. That was all on investigative journalism that it occurred, including some of the disappearances. They found that the government was back behind them. Yeah. And of course, one of the chief editors of one of those newspapers paid the solemn price of his life, having done that. Yeah.
What is the relationship between Sri Lanka and Russia and Iran?
Very good. See, one needs to be historical on this. Actually, let me just open this a little.
Nice.
Actually, our relationship with Russia, it's okay, but our relations with China is the question here, really. It's not, Russia is economically not very powerful at the moment, and they are really not very concerned about helping people. They let go of Cuba, so why would they be involved with us? But China has become very close to us. And why did China become close to us? Because there was nobody else to get close to us. So we chose to be close to China.
But I think Russia is also very close to China.
Russia is close to China.
Yes.
Well, that I wouldn't be able to comment. But at the time of war, with the large number of diaspora or the Tamils migrated to America, Canada and to Europe, they lobbied those respective governments to tell them not to help Sri Lankan government in the war. And we found ourselves, the war was raging and we didn't have any arms, ammunition to fight the war with. We asked the Americans, and they didn't even provide us training for our staff, which they used to do. And it was only China which came to our aid. They gave us the arms, they gave us the ammunition, they gave us the T-56 rifles. And they trained our people as well, and we will be eternally grateful for them for that.
China is also very active in Africa now. They're building roads and schools. They're doing a lot. We're putting a lot of bases all through the United States and putting military bases in all the countries.
Well, I'm glad that the Americans are putting at least an military base. Yes, China is very active. China has built 2 ports in Bangladesh, 2 ports in Africa. They are very involved with Somalia and Eritrea, and active in Sri Lanka as well. So if you wish, and they are very positively active in Burma. So if you look at Burma, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Eritrea, Somalia, Sri Lanka, it's a lovely circle of the Indian Ocean. In the absence of anybody else, they are very much there. Whereas Sri Lanka is concerned, they've been extremely helpful. They've done the roads for us, they've done the ports for us, they've done the airports for us. They've done everything for our benefit. They are building an island for us. Yes, they've
Why do
been.
you think they did that?
They want to be in these parts of the world.
That's right.
They are not very friendly with India. They are having disputes with their borderlines, and they need to be in these parts. At a time when we didn't have anybody helping us, we are glad that China was very much there. And also,
Maybe they need your country to go around to get to the other side of the world.
of course, and they need Sri Lanka to get to the Indian Ocean. Right across the Great Barrier Reef, there are a lot of tourism projects owned by the Chinese today. And I was told that some of the investments are about $40 billion right along. But those are mostly in tourism, because the Australian government brought a certain restriction about the mining industry and the Chinese. But otherwise, they were very much into the mining of Australia also. And farming, yes. They have about 150,000 acres of cattle land. Yeah. I like my government a lot, because under very tiring, difficult circumstances, they are trying to keep democracy going. There's so much of pulling and trying to smother democracy out, and they are struggling hard. And without any help from anybody else, they're trying to manage it. Yes. Because the last regime brought in a lot of racism and majoritism into the thinking of the people, and trying to control that today is extremely difficult. They brought in hatred towards the Tamils, they brought hatred towards the Muslims, told that the Sinhalese and the Buddhists that they were the supreme owners of the land, without giving it a secular concept to the country, and it's extremely difficult to wither away from such thinking today.
Seems like everybody gets along well.
We do, yes, especially in Colombo we do, because Colombo we have lots of Muslims and Tamils living here.
So melting.
It's quite a melting pot here, but there are certain areas, which, especially in the southern parts of Sri Lanka, where minorities will not be too tolerated.
Has there been any concern about surveillance and privacy?
Surveillance and privacy? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Not during this regime, not during this present government, but in the previous years, there were a lot of private lives were being checked as to what was going on.
Kind of referring to not within the country, but outside the country. New technology.
Yes. We actually, again, the Chinese built a whole spy tower to spy over India. And with the change of government, there was a certain amount of restriction on the tower coming up. But they've reduced on some of the antennas, but they are going ahead with the tower. It's quite close by. I'm sure you would have seen it coming up, yes. But the visa for America is about $300 and it's non-refundable. The interviewer you decide we don't like you coming and just tell you your $300 is gone. That's and also we've been working all these years and one couldn't get that kind of leave for a period of time to go. But yes, I need to get myself upon it. Yes.
Are you working at all now?
No, I'm retired now.
Yes.
And I do a few lectures in few colleges on economics, but I'm not a full-time employee. Yeah, so I would have time to visit America. We have 225 seater assembly, and the minorities are well represented because they have their own political parties. We have close to 42 political parties in the country, and
42?
42.
42.
Oh, 42.
Yeah.
We can't even read.
Yes.
I know.
And Parliament, the majority party who wins the elections is called upon to form a government, and leader of that becomes the Prime Minister. The President is the head of the country. We have an independent judiciary, and we have the press and the clergy. So probably the four pillars of a normal democracy would take effect and be effective. The Parliament representation of women is a very low, 15 seats only, because I think it's still that Parliament is considered as a gladiator's colosseum where you fight it out, and no, I don't think there's much debate, and it has become a bit of a manly world, which is not perceived to be very feminine. Maybe why that the numbers of women are not there. There is certain amount of thought about changing the rules and encouraging the women, but the men are totally opposed to that kind of thinking.
What a surprise.
I know. Actually, in 2015, 64% of the university interns were women. Yeah, and the men were there. But what is unfortunate about those figures is they all study, but in the workforce, we have only 33% are women. After they study, they opt to look after children in marriage and stay at home. Of course, there's two schools of thought on that. Some are saying it's such a pity that you had your free education, you've gone up to college, and then you're staying at home. You're not contributing to the betterment of the economy. But in my point of view is an educated woman at home is also good for the children, it's good for the husbands, and she will make sure that the children are better nourished, looked after, and become better citizens. Well, I personally would like to think that she would look after the money also better than otherwise. But that's one side of it. But the other positive thing is in the three main areas of economic development of Sri Lanka, such as the expatriate community, the garment industry, and the agriculture sector, more than 50% employment is women. 65% in the Middle East, 75% in the 80% in the garment industry, and in the agriculture sector 60% are women. The rights of women in Sri Lanka is very strong. If you go in for a divorce, which is not very high, but man is compelled to look after the woman and the children, and make sure that 50% of your assets are given to her. She has a right to, she would have a choice with the rights of the children. It's not an obvious arrangement. It'll be at a certain social level. People would come and say, okay, your son is a graduate from the University of Colombo. My Aunt Mary's daughter, she's a pretty girl and she's done her college education as well. Would you like to meet her? And the house will arrange a tea party. And you'll say, this is Mary, this is Jonathan, and you meet up. You would kind of see that at a certain social level, that you would mix around at that social level, and that will be considered to be arranged. especially for a girl, you would wait for the aunts and the uncles to introduce a proper young man. And that would be in a way to be arranged. They will make sure that the boy is a Buddhist and the boy is Sinhalese, and it will be arranged in that manner.